We've been dealing with the topic, dealing with pain in the midst of being so blessed. And we want to go to the second installment of this. In the first part, we talked about Psalm 22, verse 11 to 19, 1 through 11. And the points for that were that in his pain, David stays connected to God. So no matter what's going on in our lives, as long as we stay connected to God, we realize that God is in the midst of helping us through these scenarios. David also articulates his pain. Matter of fact, his prayer, Psalm 22 is a prayer. His prayer becomes a model of prayer that gets incorporated into the Psalms, into the Psalter. 3, that David was honest, David was open, and David was not afraid to be vulnerable. He was honest, he was open, he was not afraid to be vulnerable. And then 4, that by acknowledging that he needed help, that became the first step of his healing. That acknowledging that he needed help became the first step of his healing. So we want to go a little deeper today. Dealing with pain in the midst of being so blessed. And we want to go part 2 here. Psalm 22, verses 11 through 19. 11 through 19. I'd like to read this to you. This is David speaking to God. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, and there is none to help. Many bulls encompass me, strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a raving and roaring lion. I am pouring out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is it is melting within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue strikes to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death, for dogs encompass me. A company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all of my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them. And for my clothing they cast lots. But you, O Lord, do not be far off. O you, my help, come quickly to my aid. This is a perplexing moment. And this is one moment that I wish that more saved folks would talk about. Things are really bad. I mean, David explains in the midst of like raving and ravaging animals are after him, trying to rip him up, trying to eat him. He uses bulls. He uses dogs. He uses the word enemies. So things are bad. Sometimes in our spiritual lives we act like that things are never bad. People ask you how you doing, and even though you're in the midst of suffering, you always say, oh, everything's good, everything, I'm all right, I'm hanging in there. And the realization is that your healing does not come when you're not honest and open and sometimes vulnerable. David opens this thing up by suggesting to everyone that no matter how bad things are bad here, that he's able to cry out to God, and he's open and honest about how he cries out. We often think that if we are living a godly life and no problems come about, no suffering come about, and it's exactly the opposite. When you live for God, folks who are not God-like will come and challenge you. They will get in your face. They will try to push you around. They try to do everything that they can to disturb you and to try to shake you from your faith. But God says, I will never leave you, nor will I forsake you. So to me, if you think about it this way, Rick Warren and Purpose-Driven Life, and I'm not a huge fan of that, but I like this concept that he comes up with, that life is a test, life is a trust, and life is a temporary assignment. I like this because this works for me. Life is a test, life is a trust, and life is a temporary assignment. During a test, you're asked to reflect upon all the information that you learned within the season. So if you're having a test on a chapter or having a test on 2 chapters, you're asked in that test to reflect on all the information, all the knowledge and wisdom that you learned from those 2 chapters. And before the test, the instructor, the teacher, the professor, whoever it is, your tutor, prepares you for the test. The teacher says, these are the things that I'm going to test you on. The questions will look like this. These are the things I want you to know about. These are the things that I want you to wrestle with and try to understand. If you have any questions, come ask me, because I'm working on your best behalf. So I want you to work with this information. And when it comes test time, we'll see how you do. During the test, the teacher is silent. During the test, the teacher sits back, usually sits at her or his desk, and does whatever they do to see how you will execute the test. Will you do the things that you were supposed to study? Will you take your time? Will you check your work? I believe that God is the same way. That God takes us through seasons of learning, and then there's seasons of tests where God literally is silent. God sits back and says that everything you need for this test, we've already worked through. We've taught you all the fundamentals, all the tools, all the skills. You have all the resources, all the people you need. So I'm just going to sit back for a little bit, and I'm going to see how you utilize those things that I've given you. Well, how do we know that God has given us those things? Because life is a test. Life is a trust. Meaning that God entrusts skills, talents, wisdom, resources in our lives even before we're born. So literally, God has planted within you everything that you need to be successful based on how you define success. God has entrusted in you. God has trusted. God has laid away within you everything that you need to be successful in the test. So what about this temporary assignment? Well, life is a temporary assignment. We do the best that we can through the various stages of life so that we can matriculate to the next stage, right? So when you're in kindergarten, you work hard with the kindergarten material so that you can go to the 1st grade. When you're in the 5th grade, you work hard on the 5th grade material so that you can go to the 6th grade, perhaps a new school. When you're in the 8th grade, you work very hard on the 8th grade material. Take the exams that you need to take with the hope that you do very well and you'll go to the 9th grade, perhaps a new school. When you're in 12th grade, you work very hard so that you can apply to colleges, so that you can go to the college of your choice. The college of your choice is based on how you do tests, how you use the things that God has trusted you with, but also how are you maturing as a person. Are you the type of person that when you get off on your own, that people will respect you and people will feel that you can take care of yourself? So life is a temporary assignment because as we grow and mature, we have different stages of assignments. So after college, you go off and get a job. You go off and you have a family. Right? You get married and have a family. And it becomes a new assignment. You raise your children to be good, successful, young people, and then they go off. And so your assignment continues to change over the various stages of your life. But what does this have to do with dealing with pain? When you look at the macro is the big picture. That means when you step back and you look at everything that's going on in your life, you realize that God is right there. That God is all-powerful and God can do all things but fail. And if God is with you, then that means that you can do all things but fail. So it means that you are really, really blessed. And when you get into the weeds, I call them micro, when you get into the micro, then you realize how many challenges and obstacles you really have. So how do you deal with pain in the midst of being so blessed? You realize that God is right there. And you realize that as you cry out to God, as I said on Sunday, sometimes we need to go away away and just scream and shout. Sometimes we need to holler and let it all out. But as you realize that God is right there, every now and then you need to step away from the micro into the macro. When you get to the macro, you see that as Hurricane Sandy came, that you still have a place to live. When you look at the macro, you see that as Hurricane Sandy came, you still have people who love you and people who will do anything for you. You see that even though Hurricane Sandy came, so many people are hurting, that you still have a warm bed to lay your head in. You still have warm food to eat. So as much as we're in pain because of the small stuff in the micro, when you step back into the macro, you see that you are part of a fellowship of people who really care about each other. That makes us so blessed. So what am I getting at? What am I getting at? God is always an outlet for communication. Communication is key. No matter how bad things are, you have to learn how to communicate in the midst of your struggles. If things are going bad at school, you have to communicate that to somebody. If things are going bad in the neighborhood, you have to communicate that to somebody. If things are going bad on the field, you have to communicate that to somebody. Well, who is the somebody? This is the way I think. I try to communicate with God first. Because sometimes when my thoughts are very raw, they don't come out the right way. So sometimes when I'm going through and I feel like I just want to scream, I want to scream at people, I try to scream at God first. Because God will help me to realize that the macro, I'm really blessed. And so when I scream at God, God turns it around and says, you know what? I think this is a situation that this person could handle. So I remember being a young person trying to scream at God, and God was like, okay, this situation right here, I think you should take that to both of your parents. And I'm like, no, they're going to get upset. And God says, well, no. In your young mind, you think they'll get upset. In God's mind, that's the way it's supposed to work. So there are times when you think that your parents are going to get so upset, and the realization is they're actually happy that you came to them and tell them what's going on. And then sometimes it's sad because they don't want you to go through the things that you go through. But sometimes you take it to God first so you can figure out how to articulate it the right way. So you can share it. So rather than saying, I can't stand it, you can come and say, well, what happened was this. First, this happened. As a response to that, this happened. As a response to that, this happened. And the way I feel about all this stuff is this. And then you realize that there's a different way of handling things. So even in your pain, communicating is key. Because the more you keep it in here, the worse it gets. So we have to learn to communicate. I want to share this as I close. I often say that we make the mistake of trying to pray situations away. And I like the fact that when you go through the storm, that's when the rainbow shows up. What I haven't said is this, and this is what I've been wrestling with this week. When you're in the midst of the storm, have you ever just looked up? Have you ever just looked up? I'm fascinated by every now and then when you see the clouds, and the clouds will make shapes. And sometimes even in the midst of the storm, when there's so many clouds, you'll look up and you see a rose, or you'll see a flower, or you'll see a bunny rabbit, or you'll see like an eyeball or a face in the cloud. I mean, have you ever been there when you've seen this? And for me, what that means is, in the midst of your storm, if you look up, God will actually wink at you or give you a sign just so that you know, even though God may be silent, God is there. It's just like the teacher taking the test. When you look up from your paper just to see what's going on, that teacher is still in front of you. Teacher may not be saying anything, but the teacher is there. And I believe that that's how God is in the midst of our storms, in the midst of our pain. Sometimes we just need to look up into the sky. Take a deep breath. And God will allow the sun just to shine through everything just for a moment, just for you to see that everything is okay. So as we deal with pain in the midst of being so blessed, sometimes it's hard to realize that we are so blessed because things are so painful. But the realization